Um, no, the question is, what's the status of rail expansion or transit expansion to West Seattle? And I'm not sure people are well aware of where things stand with Sound Transit and the development of Sound Transit's long-range plans. So that's why I gave you a phone call. And people know that I've worked really hard on developing a transit master plan for the city of Seattle. And I've made a commitment to working to not just count on the region to pay for transit, but how can we locally invest more in transit as well. One of the things that came out of that was the planning of a joint planning with Sound Transit to Ballard. But I don't know that people are aware that Sound Transit is also doing a high-capacity transit study right now for not just for downtown to Ballard, but also Ballard to the U District and downtown to West Seattle. So there's a story behind that, and that's really what I wanted to tell, was where that's at. The big picture is that Sound Transit is updating its long-range plan, and they have to update their long-range plan if they're going to prepare for a Sound Transit 3 ballot. The most ambitious schedule that Sound Transit 3 could be accomplished would be by 2016, and that would require doing all of their corridor studies, updating their long-range plan, and then deciding what would go into a Sound Transit 3 package. So that's on the policy side. On the funding side, there are some significant challenges, which is Sound Transit 3 right now, pretty much all of their revenue is devoted to building and operating the Sound Transit 2 package. So if they're going to have a Sound Transit 3, they're going to need additional revenue authority from the state legislature. So the story that I wanted to tell was that when I got on the Sound Transit board and we started doing the Transit Master Plan, we pushed Sound Transit to accelerate its planning for downtown to Ballard, and we came up with some of our own money to do that planning too. And when we did that, the reaction from the rest of the region at first was, hold it, we don't want Seattle to build out more when we're still waiting to get our lines out to Tacoma, Everett, and out to Redmond. Right? We don't want Seattle going too fast and getting too far out ahead of us. So you guys need to slow down a little bit. But when they looked at the logic of the fact that we were putting money in, they already had money to do the planning, why not start doing the planning for Sound Transit faster? And we held a retreat, the Sound Transit Board held a retreat in November. We held a November retreat. And at that November retreat, there was actually a very significant policy decision was made by the entire board, which was, since they'd already made the commitment to go ahead with us to do that planning, they made a policy decision that they were going to accelerate all of their corridor planning throughout the region, and so that they could get the planning done in a timely way for Sound Transit 3 by 2016. They said, let's set 2016 as the target date, and let's go to work right now on doing all the long-range planning. And one of the things that's come out of that is that there are 3 different corridor studies that are for Seattle that are underway, or are about to be underway. Downtown to Ballard is underway already. Ballard to the U District will start this summer. Downtown to West Seattle will start this summer as well. And that is an internal process of Sound Transit where they will study the high-capacity transit alternatives for each corridor. Then, after they do all those studies, then they'll go out and do a public process to update the long-range plan, which is a necessary step before developing a Sound Transit 3 package. So that's the policy and planning side. Then, of course, there's the legislative and political side of getting more authority. So that's what I wanted to share. I'm not in my conversations with people in West Seattle. I've been discovering that people they rightfully are, there was a plan to bring a model out to West Seattle, and a lot of people feel, discouraged by how that turned out in West Seattle, for West Seattle. And there's also, I hear from everybody about the challenges about getting to downtown with the challenges on the viaduct construction and the rest. And people ask me, well, what about transit for West Seattle? So I just wanted to give an update on where we were and what was happening next. So that was the purpose of this.
Okay, now that you mentioned several times I know that this study was part of the ballot measure that was reworked after the first ballot measure was defeated, then they threw in, I believe they threw in West Seattle or something like that. Isn't that where this came from, the West Seattle study for Sound Transit?
They put in money, when they passed Sound Transit 2, what they did was they put in money to do the planning for Sound Transit 3. So all of these corridors have been identified in the long-range plan previously as corridors for review. But if they're going to go to a ballot, they have to update their long-range
Right.
plan.
And 2016 is the target, then you've mentioned that several times, for the next ballot measure.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's
Correct.
what, so right now we're looking at a plan to look at a ballot measure in 2016, and then of course with maybe funding through. I forget
Oh,
what the
it'll
delay-
take some time.
Yeah,
It'll
it might
take
be
some
another
time.
15 years or so before we.
It would take a while, but that's, once they adopted the plan, it's worth looking back at Sound Transit 2,
Right.
right? So I can't make anything hard and fast. So yeah, it would have to get into Sound Transit 3. And then once we're funded in Sound Transit 3, so Sound Transit 2 was passed 2008, right?
Yeah.
So we're about to we're on track to open the First Hill streetcar line, which was funded through that. So that was a 6-year timeline, and that's pretty fast. Sound Transit 2 also funded Northland. And where are we on? Michael is on SDOT staff and is very
Michael
James.
Okay, right.
And so I asked Michael along because he's the SDOT staffer who supports me in my work on the Sound Transit Board.
Sure.
So
as you know, Sound Transit will be opening up to the Stadium Station in 2015, then up to Northgate by 2021, and then the next step going out of Seattle out to Millwood by 2020.
Is that all part of Sound Transit too? That's
right.
Okay.
But that gives you kind of the potential scale of
Right.
from passage of Sound Transit 3 to building something out. There's a 6 to 15 year
Right.
time frame to complete projects.
Right. And I have to say though that, and I talked to the people that you had breakfast with here on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Regarding that some of this came up among many other things.
That was one of the things, and actually after I spoke with them, that conversation was one of the ones that made me think, boy, I gotta, like they weren't aware of this, and they're pretty engaged people. They weren't well aware of where we were with Sound Transit. So I was figuring if we want to inform people what's going on in West Seattle, there's nobody better than you two to at least just give you an update. I'm just trying to be,
Right.
flat, describe it, just exactly where it is and what the challenges are.
Right, but there's a lot more. I mean, that's not really. West Seattle probably has the most challenges of the other corridors. You're building a streetcar to First Hill, and while it had a few things, we've got a bridge you'd have to get over to
You
get
got to do Amish River crossing,
Yeah.
right, to accomplish. And that's one of the things that you'd have to, that's one of the things that adds to the expense of doing the project. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think the timing to be doing it along with Ballard and the regional plan makes a lot of sense. If we were just looking, West Seattle to downtown on its own, you're going to get a little more myopic look, focusing on some of these engineering mistakes. But we can actually look at it with several of these corridors going on. We actually look at it more as a system, and it starts to make a lot more sense when you start thinking about the ridership that you can pull in from a larger West Seattle area, potentially connecting to a Ballard line. So you can start to see some of the synergy with doing this all together.
To do the planning altogether.
Yeah.
But no, it's unquestionably there's the expense of getting over the Duwamish, and the biggest constraint that Sound Transit has is dollars right now. So for example, Sound Transit dropped the First Hill station
Right.
and substituted the First Hill streetcar line as a response. So I mentioned that they're now trying to do. One way to look at it is with the recession that hit, they're trying to accomplish about 90% of the Sound Transit program with about 70% of the money. That's currently what they're looking at. And they're hopeful that an uptick will help them out. So they will unquestionably need a new revenue source. So, but we need a new revenue source too in Seattle if we want to take care of our local streets and to have dollars to put into some of our own dollars to put into transit expansion. But this is the main point I would want to make here is that this is the venue to have a dialogue about how are we going to expand high-capacity rail transit to West Seattle. This updated long-range plan and these high-capacity studies is that venue right now.
Right, and that's always been there on the background. I looked it back up on Sound Transit site. And transportation is a huge, huge topic. We spend a ton of time reporting on it. So I'd have to ask, is there something that you're working on, especially as you look toward a potential second term, something more closer on the horizon for our part of the city? This is what people bring up, even as we talk about development, about everything else.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've been working on, and I started this over a year and a half ago, was how do we get more reliable funding source for local streets and get more reliable funding for Metro Transit as well. And I want to say it was even before, not this session, but last session, even before that one, I set up a working group with other mayors from around the state. And we ultimately, it was very successful. We started off with like 12 or 15 mayors from around the state. And we were just saying, what is it that we need to, what do we have in common, what do we not have in common? What we all had in common was we wanted more money for our local streets and we wanted better support for the county bus systems that ran. And this effort grew. We had multiple meetings, we had a facilitator we hired, and that was one pathway. The other pathway was that, in not this session, but the prior one, the suburban cities in King County couldn't reach a common approach on how to fund metro and local streets. They, who got more money between them. And so there was kind of a King County specific pathway that we needed to merge with a statewide pathway. And I actually put a lot of time and effort into that. And we ultimately got the statewide group and I remember we ultimately were sitting down at the table with me, Dow Constantine, Skip Priest of Federal Way, Dennis Law of Renton, John Marchione, to make a deal around what's now the local funding options bill that's in the Senate. And that proposal, we got signatures from 47 mayors around the state, Republican and Democrat. Turns out that, potholes aren't partisan. So that's been the other piece I've been working on, because if we want to expand frequency on our bus routes, Metro needs more dollars. If we're going to have more frequent and reliable, more frequent service, if we want more reliable service, SDOT is the one that has to put the money into the street rights of way around things like transit signal priority and other things. And that's our biggest hang up too, is the more dollars we have, the more we can do to speed the routes. And that was the other reason I did the Transit Master Plan, was to identify, a lot of the focus on the Transit Master Plan has been, where should we put our money into routes? A lot of the focus on the Transit Master Plan has been on the high-capacity corridors we identified. But we identified 15 other priority corridors as well, and that includes West Seattle. So we now know what are high-frequency corridors that we want to put investments in. The biggest thing is dollars, frankly, and I've worked to try to put more dollars into those improvements with our dollars, but we need more help from the state with the local funding options, and Metro desperately needs the money, or they're going to see revenue cuts. So that's, the other thing I'd say is, if you allow me, is if you look at where we had a deep recession, we had to make reductions in our budget too. But I've actually increased general fund support to transportation over the last couple of years. And I did it because when we found savings, or we found additional real estate excise taxes, we didn't put it back into another major project. We've tried to get it out around the city. So the rubble yard, when we sold it, we put it into spot repairs, we put it into our transit planning process, the transit master planning process. The Spokane Street savings have gone into street repairs, but also freight master plan development, head master plan, bike master plan implementation. And one of the things that's in the supplemental right now is, to improve the intersection on Admiral Way. Just like we have money to improve 75th Street in the supplemental too, because of the accident there. We're also bringing in traffic safety cameras around the city. We announced 5 more today,
Right.
And I've promised to dedicate that money towards. Safe routes to school improvements, which people want, and it kind of comes out of my background as a Greenwood neighborhood guy. I worked on getting sidewalks north of 85th when I was in Greenwood, and people still ask about that. And I've really worked if you look at my capital spending priorities, things I started. Now there are things that other people started that I have to finish. Tunnel's one of them. Mercer Street's another. Spokane Street's another. You know, that's a commitment. But of the ones, capital spending lifts that have occurred in my administration, the seawall is the biggest, by far. But after that, the second biggest, I would say, is the probably 30 million we've put into, you know, basic street infrastructure and maintenance around the city, from the rubble yard and from REIT and from savings. After that, South Park Bridge at 15 million. 15 million for Head Overpass at North Gate. 10 million for Linden Avenue North. I'm not just in the transportation world. As well as developing a transit master plan process and updating that has been a significant amount of dollars. And that's for talking about getting out to the neighborhoods. In the non-SDOT space, we took $10 million in savings from the park levy, the inflation account that wasn't needed. And Pete Spaulding, who was on that oversight committee, was a big help on this. We put that back into facilities around the city to catch up on maintenance. So you know, those have been my capital lifts, has been to try to figure out how to invest around the city in basic infrastructure and transit, as well as safe walking and biking routes. And if I had more money, either, you know, as the economy improves or if we could get additional funding sources, that's where I continue to prioritize my investments.
Sure. I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, back to the light rail real quick. So, like with the study that Sound Transit will do this summer, all the development that's happening in West Seattle, it's kind of a mixed bag for people. There's a lot of gripes, of course, with changing character. But is that something they take into account? I mean, is that fodder for the possibility of it coming to fruition, I guess?
Yeah, they definitely look at where population is and where ridership patterns are. Mike could probably give a little more detail to that answer.
Yeah, you know, what Sound Transit is doing these studies, they're looking at, you know, the population and employment projections for 2035. So they're looking out into the future based on the existing plans, the work that are, you know, the PSRC has done around transit communities, what the Seattle Planning Commission has done with their transit communities work. So they're looking at the plans that we've developed within the city to identify those activity centers and those, and really what the population employment is going to be that would be riding and utilizing the transit.
Okay.
Sort of related to that, this is a question that comes up often, is beyond just light rail or, you know, bus rapid transit, any other component, is can you tell me a little bit how it works for somebody looking at the big picture? We have, as you mentioned, a lot of developments coming up here. We have literally thousands of units online right now. People talk about Ballard all the time. West Seattle probably has more units in the pipeline, many of them right in this area where we're talking. And it's not really clear who's looking at the big picture to say, okay, you're building 2,000 units, but the roads you're already at X% growth capacity, X% road capacity. Does that come into any of the planning that you do, that your cabinet does?
You know, we're behind on transit. We're way behind on transit. You know, we should have started a long time ago on building transit to connect our neighborhoods to each other. So one thing that came out of our transit master plan process was, you know, we're doing a better job of connecting our regional centers in the Puget Sound region to each other. We don't do a very good job of connecting neighborhoods to each other. And that's why we did a transit master plan. You can't count on the region to do planning to connect all our, you can't count on the region alone to do planning to connect our neighborhoods. We really have to focus in on that. And that was why the transit master plan was important, was to understand where those neighborhood-to-neighborhood connections were and how we should prioritize. And again, it goes back to why I've been working so hard to get additional funding for local streets and transit. I think that's a big gap. Parks, we've done a little bit better, although it's a real challenge in some of our growing neighborhoods to have the parks levy money actually buy what you need it to buy. You know, so for example, in Belltown, we're going to convert a street to a park because we just can't afford to buy a park in Belltown with our levy funds. So, and we need to do a better job of getting our community center hours open. That's another demand that we need to meet as the city grows. And, you know, we've started the Parks Levy planning process. And I'm hopeful that the next Parks Levy planning process, I posted a blog post on this a while ago, one of the things it's going to do is we've got good facilities, let's get more use out of the ones we have. and expand our community center hours. So we're definitely behind on some of those things. The counterpoint I would make is that we're really fortunate in this city that we're attracting jobs. I mean, very fortunate. Unemployment is way down from where it was at the peak of the recession. And that economic activity helps fuel the investments we make. It's that those real estate excise taxes helped us make those investments in local streets. It's not enough, but it also helped us get through the budget crisis we had and maintain our police force and maintain, we didn't close fire stations. We substantially maintained our police force. We kept all our community centers open, not as much as we like, but we kept all our pools open. So that economic activity is critical to making the investments. I just would like more help from the state in giving us the tools to make those investments. And I'd love to get Sound Transit to the ballot as soon as we could, because we're behind. But where the development goes is determined by the zoning that's on the ground.
We know that, yeah.
And
But it's the question, though, that this comes up over and over again is there anybody looking at the big picture? We know the zoning was made long before you came in office, before your predecessor, before your predecessor, before your predecessor, and yet developments come forward kind of as one-offs.
Well, this is the history, right? Is for decades we've neglected basic infrastructure, and we didn't invest in transit, back when. I mean, the classic example is forward thrust, of course. So we have a lot of work to do to catch up, and at the same time we have to keep upgrading our electrical grid. We have to invest in cleaning up the Duwamish, because we didn't take care of our natural assets either. So we have a lot of deferred expenses. So when you say, are we looking at the big picture, the answer is yes, we are. Budgets and capital programs are a reflection of what do we need to do the most, but we're undeniably behind on where we need to go. It's, if I may say so, it's one of the reasons I've always been skeptical of these massive mega projects, because they soak up huge quantities of capital, and we need that capital, I think, for basic street infrastructure, basic utility infrastructure, as well as expanding transit. Those are my priorities, and it's kind of gotten me in trouble once in a while when I raise questions about the mega projects. But we've got 122 bridges in this city that I got to take care of. We have to take care of, and we've got a maintenance backlog on local streets that's gigantic. We've got big chunks of the city without sidewalks. So what I've been doing is every chance I get to steer some more money that way, I'm doing that. And part of that is, as you go through the process of getting these bigger projects done, Mercer, Spokane, this massive waterfront project, I want to try to lay the groundwork so that the next generation of big capital lifts are taking care of basic infrastructure and investing in transit. That's I've learned a few things on this job, and one of the things is that the decisions you make in planning and building the political will around certain things can be really hard to reverse once they get too far along. So my goal now is to get the right things started so that when they get far enough along, we can have the political will to see those to conclusion.
There was one particular funding mechanism I wanted to ask you about, because it comes up again in a lot of our community meetings. Right now, as you know, the state, we can't even rely on the state for the whole, unless you've heard some good news in the past hour or so, for the transportation package. People ask often about impact fees for development.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have a position on that.
I think that we do have impact fees in the sense of affordable housing. That's been where the city to date has prioritized where the dollars should go for new development. The incentive fee program. There's a certain amount of profit to be made when you upzone, and the goal has been to try to figure out what can you leverage from new development to go into public benefits. And to date, the highest priority has been to take that and put it into affordable housing. You could look at having a different mix. South Lake Union actually has had a small amount that goes towards transportation.
Right.
And some people have spoken about a school impact fee as another one. The challenge is that the amount of profit from new development isn't going to finance all of our development needs in the city. We need more broad-based funding sources to do that. And you don't want to set the fees so high that you don't get any new development, or that you don't get the new development that you'd like to see to accommodate the fact that we have new jobs here. So it's a Goldilocks problem.
So you don't think that it's, for example, to have an impact fee for transportation specifically in an area like West Seattle where I'm not opposed to doing that, right? But the question is, this is the Goldilocks problem. First, let me just say what the Goldilocks problem is, which is you don't want to set it too low because you don't want to, take advantage of an opportunity to invest in public benefits. You don't want to set it too high because then it's not an incentive anymore, and nobody takes advantage of it, and you don't get anything. So you want to get it just right, which is challenging. Then when you decide what the just right amount is, what are the priorities for that? Is it affordable housing? Is it childcare? Is it historic preservation? Is it street? Is it for streets, or is it for? I'm leaving something out, or is it for schools? And I think people look at that new development and say, well, let's make new development pay for everything. And the reality is that there's just not enough profit in there to pay for everything. We have to make choices. To date, the choices have been in affordable housing has been the priority set by the council for incentive programs. And you could have a different mix, certainly, and that can be a community-driven type of thing. So something we did that was interesting in South Lake Union was we are accepting some transfers of development rights so that they can go a little bit higher. And as a result of taking those transfers of development rights, which the developers buy from the county will give us their property tax revenue from South Lake Union, and we'll put it back into the neighborhood. But I remember when that first came up, I was really excited. Awesome. But the dollar figures were, like, I don't remember exactly what it was. I should get it for you. It wasn't that much. It just wasn't that much. And the new development and the new jobs that we're creating do create a more basic spending. One of the things you're talking about, development fees or impact fees and neighborhood-specific stuff, that's why I started only in Seattle, was to try to have dollars go towards neighborhood business district plans. And one of the things I did in my last supplemental was, I think we went to increase the neighborhood street fund. Now I need to double check that. But we did.
Spokane Street Savings.
Spokane Street Savings. We want to update the neighborhood street fund. I've tried to maintain as healthy a neighborhood matching fund as I can. So I like setting aside pools of money to be community directed. And we can do that out of the general fund as well as trying to get community directed funds out of new development.
So we've got a couple more minutes. So is there, since we're here, is there anything else you guys want to cover? Any other topics? I got it.
Hey man, I think good.
How you doing, man?
Maybe just one question for you, like just people that are curious, like engineering wise, how the hell do you get a mono rail or a light rail across the Duwamish? Like, is that something they're talking about yet? Are there thoughts on how you pull that off engineering wise?
Well, what they'll be doing is identifying different alternative corridor options. One could be, the questions they have to ask is, can you get it on an existing bridge? If so, do you have to retrofit? Or does it, from a cost-benefit perspective, does it make sense to build a new structure? You're going to have to look at, the seismic and soil issues. Okay. So there's several, they're going to look at all the risks, evaluate with different corridor types to come up with kind of the preferred alternative that they would want to assess. Okay. And then from that point, compare with all the other corridors.
We brought Michael on to SDOT to help us with the transit master plan and to support us in SDOT. And just his background was you were in...
I was down in Phoenix, planning, designing, implementing a 20-mile light rail system.
Okay. So he brings he brings a skill set we didn't have in the city government before. So it's really great to have his experience going that through process. I think it is. Yeah, we didn't really have somebody who'd kind of gone from the beginning substantially through the development of a transit line. We needed that type of experience in city government so we could, work better with Sound Transit and look at how we'd implement our transit master plan too.
I have a short transportation question and a non-transportation. Short transportation question. Another bridging the gap levy in the works?
Yes. Although to say in the works, I think everybody anticipates that when the next one expires, we'll want to have another one, the funding ready. We're looking at something like $40 million a year from it.
Right.
How do you structure it? You know, is it like the last one, which is kind of a mix of a number of different things? Do we want to look at more than one? Do we want to start getting more specific funding packages, ask the voters specifically about transit or about bridges or about, you know, other things? So those are really great questions, but that would be, it's a good thing to start thinking about now. It's
Some projects are being shaped already, I know, in some districts.
Right. 2015 will be when that all comes to a conclusion. 2014 is the Parks Levy renewal. 2015 is when we'll be looking at bridging the gap. So I think that type of thinking about projects that you mentioned, but also about how do you shape it. And there's some lessons to be learned from the vehicle license fee. And, you know, speaking of which, you know, the vehicle license fee was an attempt to get some more dollars. People didn't like the tax source, right? But it was kind of like bridging the gap because it was a mix of different things. I also, first year in, moved to increase the commercial parking tax to help pay for local street improvements. And I didn't get that one either. So I've been trying to get more dollars for transportation. It's been a 3-year effort so far. So we've learned a little bit.
Okay, so I can
Next
get this
question.
before you go. The next question is, we have been following very closely the issue of the Homeland Security grant surveillance cameras.
Oh.
SPD has finished their meetings. They told us when we covered the meeting in Ballard a couple of weeks ago, they didn't expect any more public meetings. You had said you wouldn't make a decision until there was a thorough public vetting. Where does this stand from your
Where does it stand right now? I think the next step on this is having listened to the public. SPD will bring down to the city council staff and the head of the, I think it's Harrell's committee, we'll bring down to Bruce Harrell, proposed policy and see what they say about how it would be used and implemented. And then, of course, there would be a public hearing process before this were adopted by the council.
Okay, so
We'll
you
need
don't.
the council to sign off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Council
So-
before you have a final word.
Yeah, right. I thought you were going to ask me a Nicholasville question.
Oh, we'd be happy to hear the latest on that, but we were all over it yesterday. So I mean,
I
anything
don't
new
think
happens
no,
today?
there's no new developments.
Have you been there lately?
I haven't been there lately. There's like the sun is like reflecting.
Yeah,
right
no,
off
I can
your
see that.
head.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just like take the sunshine and you've got
It
a halo
actually- it
behind
actually-
you now. Tracy,
It looks good. You've got
wow.
it's a little
Yeah,
trippy.
yeah, the voice of God is coming up now from West Seattle Block.
Yeah.
No, there's last time I was down there was a few months ago. I'm trying to remember when I went down last. I went down there before going to West Seattle Town Hall. I remember I went down and walked around so that I could see it. But I do understand that it's more and more sort of work has been done by the people there. So, but I haven't been down there a little bit. Actually, I was thinking I should go down there.
If you do, let us know.
I will let you know if I do that.